Good morning. Come on. Good morning. We're the last panel before lunch. You'll be happy. So I'm Mayor John Dickert from Racine, Wisconsin, home of the best tasting water in America and one of the best beaches in the world. And I'm happy to be here to talk about global climate and some of the issues that we're dealing with. But as I spoke at the One Water Summit in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, how many people were there? Was there anybody? Okay, so we have some of the folks that were there. It was a great conference, all talking about us coming together over one water because drinking water is so precious. And I found it interesting as we're having this conversation, and as I talk to my colleagues from around the world, we've noticed that climate change is incredibly important and becoming more important. And Mitch Tulin and I were at the Global Climate Summit in Washington, D.C. about a month or so ago. 29 mayors were invited from around the world. We were blessed to be there to represent the Great Lakes. And as we talked, I'm going to get what I call a little caffeinated now. As we talked, we started noticing that there was one thing that was consistent. In Paris, for the most part, the leaders said, we need to pass this down to the mayors because they're the ones on the ground and they're the ones that are doing all the work anyway. So we're going to have them do that because in the United States, our federal government and some of the provincial governments and the governments around the world are simply not getting the job done. And candidly, they had no belief that they could. There is no more efficient, effective, and willing group than the mayors to work with the private sector in tandem with all of the very smart people like we have out in this group here and around the world to get things done. We are efficient in transportation, we are efficient in infrastructure, we are efficient in water, and we can do all these things. But what we noticed was, and what we constantly hear, and we'll have our panel talk about this in a couple of seconds, is that there's this hesitancy by people at the upper echelons to get things done because, well, we'll either wait for the next president or we'll wait for the next Congress or we will wait for this or we will wait for that. And candidly, it's a bunch of excuses. And I think it is time now that we as mayors and you as individuals and you people that are watching this to say it is time to put on your big boy pants and start making decisions and getting things done, or big girl pants if you want. Thank you, Michelle. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that we have far too many people sitting around on the sidelines instead of doing the work that it takes to get this job done. So if you're not going to do it, I say to you, get out of the way. Because the mayors are going to do this work. We are going to sit down and answer these questions, solve the problems, and move this country and this planet forward. And we're going to do it by rebuilding our infrastructure and rebuilding our transportation, creating the most efficient and effective models on the planet. And we're going to do it with your help. But if you folks are not willing to do it at the federal or state level, then it is time that you move on. Because the fact is, we have to do this. It is inherent upon us to do this right now for our kids. I, as a mayor, and I know everybody else that's a mayor and a colleague in this room agrees, we will not leave this on as the legacy to our children. We will not wreck this planet and leave that in our kids' hands, and neither should you. So it is time to do this, to start pushing, to start getting answers and start moving forward. And if the folks at the state and federal level aren't going to do it, then pass it down to us because we will. We need the funding, just as a reminder, but we will do it. So it is time to get moving here. We mayors know how to do it, and we will get it done. But today we have a great panel who's going to talk to us about it. And I will simply say, because people ask me, what are you doing in Racine, Mayor? I will tell you. We not only have our climate action plan, but we layer everything for efficiency in Racine. Whether it's roads with sewer and water and energy, whether it's stormwater with what we're doing in our basin, with what we're doing with our public works or our parks or our health department, everything is layered. Everyone plays team ball in Racine. And that's why we have been so incredibly successful in the city. So we know how to do this. We're going to hear from some great panelists today, and I'm excited about it because as mayors, like I said, we're caffeinated. We like to get things done, and we like to move forward. So our panel today is going to tell us a little bit about what we're doing to meet the climate change and the challenge that we face. And the first to speak is Fernando Caru. Fernando leads the Community Energy Planning, the CEP program of the City of Toronto, is also in charge of assembling the technical, business, and policy framework for the new District Energy Systems, the DES. He holds an engineering degree from the University of Toronto, sustainability trained from Harvard's University Extension School, and he's working towards a diploma in public administration and local government from Western University. So please join me in welcoming Fernando.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, and great call to action for everybody. And we know that really the action is at the local level. That's really where these issues actually are real, and where we have the opportunity to actually integrate and deliver solutions. So let me tell you a little bit about what Toronto has been up to. I want to tell you a little bit about the progress that Toronto has been doing, and the fact that it did not happen overnight. So there's been a lot of good work actually being done in this file, including we have with us Councillor Michael Layton from the City Toronto Council, who's been doing a lot of work in this area, including being instrumental to launching our home energy loan program, as well as the good work that he does with the Toronto Atmospheric Fund. But some of the seminal City Council adopted actions started in 2007 with the Climate Action Plan. It was strengthened in 2009 with the Sustainable Energy Plan, as well as adaptation work and inventories for greenhouse gas emissions. And lastly, we have an environmental progress report actually that was issued just last year. We have a new city manager, Peter Wallace, who is not only professionally but also personally committed to climate change. And some of the metrics in the report actually in terms of progress in Toronto, actually you can see them there. 40 megawatts of renewable energy, waste diversion programs, bike share programs, and so on. So there's a big but actually. So Toronto is succeeding, but we are one of the 10 most traffic congested cities in North America. Toronto actually's income inequality actually has grown. We have high youth unemployment as the economy changes. And we're not on track to reduce GHG emissions by 80% to 2050. We also have a current fiscal model that may not be sustainable going forward. And like many other local governments, we also have a challenge maintaining state of good repair in roads, transit, social programs, parks, water infrastructure, and so on. On top of that, actually, Toronto is changing. Toronto's population is growing and densifying, placing great demands on the infrastructure which was built 1 or 2 generations ago. It was not designed to actually service this kind of infill growth, which is smart growth, but it's vertical growth, which is very different than the horizontal growth that we've been used to actually in previous generations. So tipping point, actually about 50% of households now actually live in multi-residential housing, and the economy is changing. Employment in manufacturing has declined by about 26% over the last 10 years. So you can see how this adds to the challenges, but also the opportunities. Where there's change, there's opportunities. Just to give you a sense actually of the growth that's happening in Toronto, which is staggering. That's the skyline in Toronto between 2000 and 2014. You can see actually all the buildings. At the same time, actually, as I'm sure you've experienced in your communities, we see the weather changing. So the Environment and Energy Department actually has done work in terms of modeling the future weather in Toronto, and it's been accepted by City Council actually as a go-forward plan in terms of infrastructure and better standards for retrofits and design of infrastructure. So you can see actually that the daily maximum temperature actually is expected to rise significantly. More hot days, extended heat waves, more than we were used to. And also rainfall, maximum rainfall in a given day actually is expected to increase, as well as more heavy rains. So to give you an example, actually, this is the sort of scenes actually that we've seen in Toronto. This is actually June of 2013. We had 160 millimeters of rain actually in a very few hours. It caused actually one of the electrical transformer stations in the city actually to fail, which left about 1 million people without power for multiple days. It actually flooded rail corridors for commuters coming in and out of the city. And it flooded actually one of our major highways, the Valley Parkway, for a few hours. Extreme heat actually is also real. And you would have heard actually from our ice storm in December of 2013, which again left about 300,000 people actually without power for multiple days just before Christmas. And it's a reminder actually that at the end of this infrastructure actually there's people, right? So we heard that folks didn't have access to running water in terms of booster pumps up into their suite on a 5th, 10th, 11th floor. And the issue actually about the impact to the economy and so on. So Toronto is reducing its environmental footprint. So far to 2013, we've reduced about 5 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. We didn't do that alone. The province actually phased out coal from the power production industry, which actually reduced the emission factor of electricity in Ontario by almost 3 times. Of course, that wouldn't have been possible actually without the conservation efforts that the City of Toronto and other cities around the province engaged in to make that coal phase-out possible. Methane reduction also has made a big impact at the solid waste side, but also actually wastewater treatment plants. And of course, actually getting the land use right, at least we do have the growth, so it puts pressure on greenhouse gas emissions, but it's infill growth, compact growth, and it has a lower actually emission profile than if we would have done the old sprawl model. Now the trouble actually is going forward, if we're going to meet our commitment of 80% reduction by 2050, instead of 5 million tons, we have to reduce 15 million tons, right? And if we look at our trajectory based actually on where we've been, we're not tracking very well, so there's a gap there. So to give you also an idea in terms of where the emissions are coming from right now in Toronto, this is actually our 2013 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. As you can see, actually, it's primarily actually emissions coming from buildings, so fossil fuels, natural gas, less so from the electricity sector since our grid actually is quite clean now. And of course, actually, transportation is a huge contributor at about 41% in terms, again, of the fossil fuels, diesel and gasoline used in cars and the like. So in reality, actually, there are no easy answers, but the modeling that we're doing right now as part of a renewed climate action plan that we're working on called Transform Toronto, the early results are telling us that, of course, to deal with the transportation emissions issue in a dense urban situation, it's clearly about transit, electric transit, high-order transit, and it's also about electric vehicles, along with other behavior and social norms changing around avoiding transportation that is needless, thinking a little more about our mobility, active transportation, telecommuting, and many other things. But in terms of the high or the large magnitude, the change that we can make going forward actually is building a lot more transit. Now, similarly, in the same way that we address transportation for a big magnitude of reduction at the infrastructure level with high-order transit, the same thing holds true, actually, for buildings. So we are going to continue to do great work at the building scale, making those buildings more efficient, both existing and new. But what is emerging, actually, is that district energy, thermal networks, are to energy in buildings what high-order transit is to transportation. So you can see how Toronto is developing a transit network. That's what we have right now, including approved projects. But you can see a difference in terms of what we could have actually in the coming short years, which we need actually in terms of actually dealing with that gridlock, for prosperity and so on. Equally, on the thermal networks, the district energy side, Toronto has huge opportunity for district energy. We could be creating 30 new nodal systems around the city to deal actually with the emissions that come from buildings. If you look at the UN environmental program, they have a great document that I encourage you to look at, which is district energy in cities. And they really go through the rationale for district energy not being only an advantage actually in terms of dealing with emissions from buildings at the district scale or the block scale, but also the opportunity for these systems to actually connect to large renewable energy sources in an urban environment. So you may have heard actually about Toronto's iconic deep lake water cooling system, where we take actually lake water, we put it through our drinking water system, and in a non-contact way, the 4-degree water, the cold water actually from the lake, is used to actually cool about 120 buildings in the downtown core. That avoids almost 10% electrical demand and thousands of tons of CO2 emission reductions. So other areas that we haven't exploited yet in Toronto, but they have been exploited actually elsewhere, like Vancouver, in the case of sewer heat recovery, is really up for grabs in Toronto. We could be doing large geo-exchange, along hydro corridors, underutilized land, and in essence, actually deal with the energy issue at a larger scale and deliver the magnitude of emission reductions that we need to do in order to meet our targets. There's also actually thought of heat recovery, so free heat, from combined heat and power systems that we need to power transit. And the key, actually, this is an interesting slide, actually, that sort of summarizes the fact that if we're going to abate or reduce carbon, there's a choice to be made, actually, in terms of how much we want to pay for that. So it turns out, actually, that for urban environments that have the density like Toronto and many other places, doing so at the district scale, neighborhood scale, is much more cost-effective than doing it at the building scale. So quickly, the modeling shows that future large-scale, large magnitude greenhouse gas emission reductions in Toronto will primarily come from two sources: district energy with large renewables and efficient buildings, and transit and EV. So in a way, for cities to achieve a low-carbon future, district energy is to energy in buildings, what transit is to transportation. We've all heard about Paris, actually. It's great that we have this unprecedented alignment now between the three levels of government, the federal, the province, and the city. I remember I was told, actually, by an illustrious mayor, actually, in the GTA, that the issue with solving these big problems, actually, is that the federal government has all the money, the province has all the power, and the municipalities have all the problems. So unless you align the three, nothing of consequence actually gets done. So we're really encouraged that this is happening in terms of the alignment. And of course, actually, our mayor, John Tory, has expressed what's been expressed here as well, which is actually that really the front lines of climate change actually is in the cities, and we cannot do it alone. So there's a number of current initiatives that the City of Toronto actually is undergoing, including Transform Toronto, which is the renewed climate action, and looking at how we can bridge that gap, that we're not on track to reduce emissions and meet our targets. Adaptation, of course, the planning the downtown, which is growing very rapidly. The green standard, for new buildings, coming out with a new version, including net zero buildings. We're looking at designated, actually, the entire Portlands, the waterfront revitalization, actually, as a net zero district area. And of course, actually, our new official plan now has been revised to include an energy strategy requirement for new development in order to incorporate net zero developments in Toronto. So essentially, future starts now. 2050 is not that long away. And decisions we make today will determine our future. So the question is really, how do we support integration and collaboration towards a carbon neutral and resilient city? How do we make and build momentum? And more importantly, how do we actually build scale? How do we scale up our efforts? Because we seem to be all doing the right things, just not in the right dose. We need to really up that dose in order to make that reduction that we all want to do. So I'm reminded actually of how are we going to get this done? Well, essentially, it's pretty clear actually that if we don't have coordinated action, the big problem actually is larger than any one of us. But what about actually coordinated action? If we come together actually and look at that challenge, we're greater than the challenge, and we'll be able to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernando. It's amazing to see, unfortunately, how far our Canadian brothers and sisters are advanced ahead of us in the United States. So we have a little catch-up work to do. The good news is at the climate summit that Mitch and I were at a couple of weeks ago, Al Gore announced that out of all of the energy created in the world last year, 90% of it was renewable. So we can do this. We can fix it. Our next speaker is Paul Spicer, Vice President, Gas Renewable Generation for WEC Energy Group. Paul oversees all the operations and maintenance functions for We Energies and Wisconsin Public Service Corporation's natural gas combined cycle, natural gas peaking, hydroelectric, and wind generation plants. Paul graduated from the University of Minnesota. We're not going to hold that against him, being from Wisconsin. 1992 with a Master's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering. Please join us in welcoming Paul.
Thank you for the invitation, David, for the opportunity to come speak with you today on what we're doing as WEC Energy Group on the front of renewable generation, zero carbon generation. I think there's a lot of really good stories to share and a lot of challenges in front of us, and I'm eager to do that. Let's see if I can figure out how to, there we go. So WEC Energy Group. WEC Energy Group was formed just a year ago with a combination of Integris Energy Group and Wisconsin Energy Corporation. And when you look at the service footprint, there are a number of utilities that are served in natural gas and electricity. And when you look at the footprints and you think about where the Great Lakes are, we have hundreds and hundreds of miles of shoreline in our service territory. So I think this group is a fantastic forum for us to have a discussion about renewable generation, have a discussion about managing water, and a number of other good issues. So hopefully we can keep this relationship going beyond just this talk and this panel. One of the things to understand about an investor-owned utility is that the regulatory framework at the state level is really key to what happens on the ground. I've heard a lot already about, turning plans into actions, and we kind of heard about the federal level to the state level, to the city level, and I'm here from the industry level, and really they all have to work together. And from a electric producer's perspective, it's really the state regulations that are the primary driver. So just a real quick overview of where Wisconsin is at. So Wisconsin has kind of a three-legged stool from an electric planning perspective. So the Energy Priorities Act, Act 414 from 1993, pretty forward-looking if you think about how far ago 1993 was, actually requires us when we're doing our planning to look first to demand-side solutions, so that would be energy efficiency type solutions to meet a future need. Next, to look towards renewable, sustainable resources. Then finally, to look at natural gas, coal resources, nuclear resources, and the like. So it actually puts a priority order. That's not to say that the things that are on the highest priority will meet every need, but it needs to be considered in every regulatory filing with every plan that we put forward. And I think that's been a very nice discipline and good forward thinking on Wisconsin's part. Servicing that, then, we have very much an emphasis on demand side. And Wisconsin, I think, has a reputation of being a leader in energy efficiency. And one of the ways that that's done is that there's a dedicated group, the Wisconsin Focus on Energy, that gets funded by the electric utilities of the state. 1.2% of all revenues that the utilities generate go to Wisconsin Focus on Energy, a central clearinghouse for individual homeowners, small businesses, large manufacturers, and others to come and get grants and to get co-funding for projects that will increase energy efficiency. There's a financial discipline to it. The projects have to have a 3-year payback. It has to make sense, and it's been a really good program. And overall, we can see it in our macro planning at the electric utility level. You can really see first the slowing of the rate of growth of demand, and actually we're getting to the point where it's getting to be a small decline in the rates of demand. And finally is a renewable portfolio standard. So in 1999, Wisconsin passed its first renewable standard, and then in 2005, with Act 141, increased the standard up to 10% of all energy sold, all electricity sold in Wisconsin was to come by renewable resources by 2015. So how did our company achieve that? Primarily through hydroelectric and wind, both purchased and owned. So We Energies, as two of the largest wind parks in all of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Public Service built a major wind park in Iowa to comply with this 10% standard. In addition to that, we operate 3 major hydroelectric systems, one on the Menominee River, one on the Peshtigo River, and another on the Wisconsin River. Those all combined add up to a very large amount of renewable generation. Most recently, I think 2.5 years ago, a biomass plant was added, and I'll go into a little bit more kind of the uniqueness of the biomass plant. Much smaller quantities, but also very important, not shown on this graph, are innovations in digesters. So Wisconsin, the dairy state, we have a lot of large farms, and I think a lot of you know that the methane associated with dairy operations can be a real challenge. So there's systems that'll collect that waste, collect that methane, produce electricity, and it's a co-benefit for all. And we have another large number of those developments that have been built, financed, and are currently operating. We also have 2 programs, one for We Energies in the southeastern Wisconsin area, one for WPS in the northeastern Wisconsin area, for customers who would like their energy to become 100% renewable. So everyone has that choice, and they can pay a higher rate on their electric bill, and we will translate that into a 100% renewable resource. The programs are called Energy Tomorrow and NatureWise, respectively. Also, there's a program that WPS has had for the last 20 years in solar. And what I really like about that program is it partners with public schools. So we go into high schools, and there's just dozens and dozens of high schools over the years, and put a 2 kW solar panel up. And it also comes with educational materials. We work with the science teachers. We have experiments that we do and promote. Not only are we helping pay the electric bills of the school, but we're teaching the kids what's possible. And then we hold something called the Solar Olympics every year, where then these students can turn around and develop their own projects and compete for prizes and all that. And it's sunny most of the time. We've had the occasional rainy Summer Olympics, but generally works really well. So one of the things I just wanted to highlight, and again, it's this action piece, is that there's 0 carbon producing plants out there in the here and now. And there's a lot of folks, technicians, mechanics, electricians, engineers that work every day, all day to keep these sources running. We have 186 megawatts of existing hydroelectric. We've got over 400 megawatts of wind parks already built, up and running, and just commissioned a couple of years ago this biomass plant in Rothschild, Wisconsin. It's an interesting story. We partnered with a paper mill. If you know Wisconsin, there's a lot of paper production there. And we were able to combine that they had a waste stream of biomass, and they had a waste stream of wastewater, sludge, and they had a need for high energy steam, we had a need to produce renewable electricity. So we built this plant where we take their biomass in and their wastewater sludge that has high carbon content. We burn that and we produce the high pressure steam. We run it through a turbine, we make electricity and give them steam for their production process. So it's a real nice, efficient way and a closed carbon loop system. We also purchase a lot of zero carbon energy. We have an agreement with NextEra Energy to purchase nuclear-based energy for the next, got to be about 15 years, till 2033. We entered into an agreement with our partners in Manitoba Hydro. Manitoba Hydro is very much in the development of new large-scale hydro. And to make that work for a number of their ratepayers, what they need to do is they need to get partners. They need people who are going to be willing to pay for that energy. And WPS has a 100-megawatt path of transmission into the province of Manitoba. So we participated in the kiosk project, which is currently under construction, should be online by 2020. Again, providing renewable and zero carbon energy. And then finally, we participate with an independent wind developer, and we've taken half of their output from central Wisconsin, Forward Energy. So, EPA's Clean Power Plan, you heard Cameron mention it earlier. I think he mentioned that the Supreme Court has stated. From the company perspective, from our CEO's annual meeting, he said that we don't know how and we don't know when. Carbon regulations are inevitable, so it's on our top 10 priority list to do the planning and to do the research and to figure out what our actions are going to be in these areas. Improving plant efficiency, that's underway. We have projects on the boards for improving the efficiency of our natural gas combined cycles. Increase the gas combined cycle capacity factors. I'll show you a slide on that. That's underway substantially in those last 3 years. Investigating new wind or solar, and participating in Canadian hydro. That first 100-megawatt transaction is doing well. We're talking to the folks in Manitoba about scaling that up. Other options are to switch coal generation into natural gas, and I'll point out where we've done that. Reduce or retire coal plants. We've retired 600 megawatts of coal plants. Buying credits, allowances, energy delivery systems, and just a number. It's kind of a all-the-above approach. What this graph just shows is the biggest lever that we have to be able to reduce CO2 emissions to the Clean Power Plan levels actually is displacing coal-based electric generation by natural gas-based electric generation. The blue bars here shows how much we can do with just the existing infrastructure, switching that. The green bars are what need new investment. In our portfolio, we have three sets of what they call a 2x1 combined cycle. One up in Kaukauna, Wisconsin, and another in Port Washington, Wisconsin, where there's 2 of them. And in the graph, what you can see, there's something called a capacity factor. So that's how much that plant is running compared to its hypothetical maximum. And you can see that from 2015 to 2016, the utilization factor of those natural gas plants has been going up at a very steady and very strong pace. To give you an idea of the power of that from a CO2 perspective, a typical coal plant emits about 2,000 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. These plants emit about 700, 2,000 to 700. So as you see this production going up, and you know production is going well, is being displaced elsewhere, that's a big effect. We also took predominantly the Valley Power Plant. An interesting story, the downtown Milwaukee has a district heating facility, and the district heating has been there for a very long time, and although that's very efficient to have centralized district heating, when it's fueled by coal, it's not as environmentally friendly. We've converted that to gas. Now it's efficient and clean. So in conclusion, I hope I've been able to kind of illustrate that there's a robust portfolio that exists today, that we're planning for the future, and that we have a lot of employees out there operating, maintaining these, and they're committed to safety, integrity, inclusion, sense of urgency. I think there's a lot of good people working hard, so I'll look forward to your questions later. Thank you.
All right, everybody, it's 21st century. Smile. All right, I'm tweeting you out later. So, did anybody know that Racine had one of the first handicap beach mats in the country, thanks to this organization? All right, well, if you didn't, you do now, right? Okay, come visit us. I'm glad you've been there. You should come more often. We're located centrally between Milwaukee and Chicago on Lake Michigan. The Australians come there all the time. Trust me, it's direct flights right into Racine Baton Airport. It's good. Thanks, Paul, so much. Our final panelist is Megan Meany. She's not mean. She's really sweet. Megan Meany is the director of ICLEI Canada, and she oversees the governance of the nonprofit organization. She holds responsibility for strategic planning, partnership development, and financial systems. She's recognized by cities across Canada as an authority on municipal sustainability. She's been with ICLEI since 1999, holds a master's degree in environmental and management from Royal Roads University, as well as a bachelor's degree in environmental science and a diploma in environmental engineering. Please join me in welcoming Megan.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for having me here. This is my first visit to one of your annual meetings. I hope to make a very good impression so I can come to your next one at the Great Barrier Reef. So I'll straighten up. So I'm from ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. We're an international association of cities committed to sustainability. We have 1,500 cities in our network. We do global advocacy on behalf of cities. So when we were talking earlier about the Paris climate talks, ICLEI will be there organizing cities for their formal interventions into that process, which can sometimes look like negotiating little pieces of text and huge documents, but can sometimes look like organizing large events, large-scale events for cities at these things. It's not just the climate talks, though. That's also the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Sustainable Development Goals, all the international sort of environmental negotiations. We make sure cities are well represented there. We also run a variety of programming for cities to help build the capacity of municipal practitioners to deal with environmental objectives. And so when we were preparing for this event today, David asked me to come and share my experiences in delivering one of our programs here in Canada called the Partners for Climate Protection Program, and to share some experiences on a global program called the Compact of Mayors. So the PCP, the Partners for Climate Protection Program, that's a national program for cities in Canada that are committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's a program we run with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or FCM. It's a milestone-based program, so there's 5 milestones in the program. First one's doing a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Second is to set a target. Third is to develop a plan. Fourth is to implement that plan. And 5 is to monitor and verify that plan. So a normal kind of management framework, but it provides some commonality and consistency to the approach that municipalities take. And it helps for the practitioners in the cities to identify their peers in other cities so they can really learn from them. So as this PCP Secretariat, FCM and ICLEI, we really focus on that capacity building element. First, we have a common methodology that the cities use in the accounting of greenhouse gas emissions. So when they're doing their inventories of their corporate operations and their community at large, there's a common approach. We also have a lot of different tools and resources to help support that. So there's an online PCP tool that the cities can log in, city representatives can log into and use it to track their data, their energy data, their waste data, and visualize what their emissions are, and then start planning and modeling to see the emission reductions potential. We have a lot of different case studies that we've developed over the years that profile the different types of measures they've implemented, the costs associated with them, some of the barriers and obstacles they faced as they went through that. And then our capacity building efforts also focus on networking the network, making sure that peers that are working on this have an opportunity to collaborate nationally, regionally, and that sort of thing. And then finally, we also make sure, as the program, we also make sure there's opportunities to celebrate. And every year at the Sustainable Communities Conference, we issue awards as cities move through the milestones. They receive awards as they go through that, and it's a great opportunity to bring out elected officials and staff and really celebrate the progress that the city has made through going through those milestones. David asked me to kind of reflect on maybe some of the reasons for the PCP's success. It's been 21 years that program has been running. So last year we celebrated 20 years. And I think, one, it really focuses in on small and medium municipalities. Most of Canada is filled with small and medium municipalities. Toronto's here, Toronto's part of the network as well, but they have a lot of staff capacity in-house to be doing this kind of work and a lot of expertise to draw on. But I think if you create a list of Canadian cities and order them by population, you get down to 100,000 and below pretty quickly. So those are the ones where there's often, one sustainability coordinator that has a lot of a lot of authority and a lot on their plate. So they really benefit from a network like this. So we really try to focus in on the needs of the small and the medium municipalities. I'd also say the PCP program has had federal government support since day one, so 21 years now. And that's been consistent. And in the recent federal budget, there's been a top-up to that support. So there's the Green Municipal Fund that FCM operates that funds a lot of greenhouse gas mitigation activity in Canada and Canadian municipalities. There's also the gas tax fund that municipalities receive, and when they do, in order to receive that fund, they have to create an integrated sustainable community plan that links very closely with a lot of climate mitigation activities. And then I'd also say that there's been a lot of provincial support as well. The Quebec program, Climat Municipalité, has been around for a long time, supporting municipalities there to do their inventories and develop their plans. The Climate Action Secretariat in BC works very closely with all the BC municipalities, providing data support and planning support. And then in Ontario, we're seeing a lot more engagement between the provinces and the municipalities there. And then I wanted to also touch on the Compact of Mayors. So it's an international effort launched at the 2014 United Nations Climate Summit, and it's the world's largest coalition of city leaders addressing climate change. And you could say it's an example, to tie back to your opening comments, it's an example of mayors putting on their big girl and their big boy pants and saying, we're here, we're taking charge. It was launched in 2014, but it really gained momentum at the Paris climate talks. There's 510 municipalities that have signed on to date. 126 of those are American, 23 are Canadian. I would expect that number to really increase over the coming year. I know there's at least another 20 Canadian cities that are primed to sign on fairly soon. So a little bit about the background of the Compact of Mayors. It's really being driven by mayors. There's 3 major international city networks that are behind the scenes on this, the C40, United Cities and Local Government, and ICLEI. It's also supported by UN Habitat, the UN Secretary General's Office, and the UN Special Envoy for Cities and Climate. And then it's endorsed by a lot of other global organizations in this field, like WWF, the World Bank, WRI. So the commitment that mayors and cities make when they join this is really around a common methodology for greenhouse gas reporting and public reporting of their data. And there are a variety of tools that are available to the cities to help support this. There's CDP is involved for the reporting aspect, as well as Carbon, which is an online tool to help support the emissions reporting and, the calculations and reporting. So, but there's also, I wanted to point out, there's an adaptation component to the Compact of Mayors as well. Within the first year, cities will not only report on their greenhouse gas emissions inventory, but on their hazards. So they do a hazards assessment to evaluate what kind of risk climate change poses to their community, and a vulnerability assessment within that second report. So in Canada, we're working with a group of of cities to help support their reporting into the compact. So the compact is based on this, what we call this the GPC protocol. It's the international protocol, our methodology used for reporting greenhouse gas emissions. We have a reporting protocol in Canada as well, but it's a little bit different. And so we've got the group of 20 cities that have signed on to GPC working together to kind of deal with the areas where it's different. Here you can see, this outlines the various different scopes of emissions that are included in a GPC compact inventory. And a lot of this is familiar to Canadian municipalities, quantifying energy emissions from energy or stationary fuel combustion or waste. But there's a few sectors that aren't so common. Emissions from agricultural and forestry and other land use, that's one area that we're tackling together. Emissions from industrial processes, we don't have a lot of experience gathering that kind of data or understanding that data. And then also this out-of-boundary transportation area of aviation and rail and marine. So we've got a PCP Compact of Mayors working group established that's going to start trying to gather some data, trying to develop some common approaches that they could use for gathering that data, understanding that data, filling the gaps in that data if it doesn't already exist. And then as a secretariat, we'll make sure we kind of capture that experience and develop some resources and guidance tools for the other municipalities that are interested in doing this. I should also say, though, there are tools available to American cities as well. There's a tool from ICLEI USA called ClearPath, and that's similar to the PCP tool that I've been talking about, where you can use it for your greenhouse gas emissions accounting for your community and your corporations or your municipal operations. So I also just wanted to take 1 second to talk about the fact that we've kind of been focusing on greenhouse gas emissions mitigation, but we also talk about climate adaptation work with cities. The PCP program, it's been established for a long time, 21 years, and it was about 5 or 6 years ago that the more advanced cities in that network were saying to us, we need some common approaches to dealing with the adaptation side of things, understanding the climate impacts on our community, assessing our risk, where we're vulnerable, and kind of developing plans on the adaptation side of things. So we developed what we call our BARC program, Building Adaptive and Resilient Cities. And we've got a special project of that program happening right now in the Great Lakes. It's supported by COA, Canadian Ontario Agreement on the Great Lakes Basin. So this project, that's of the MOECC, sorry. And so this project is available to Canadian municipalities if you're interested in sort of understanding the climate impacts in your community and starting to understand what risk that poses to your community. We're doing a training program on that. So if there's any of you that might be interested, there's some deadlines here. I think it's June 27th where we need to get your expressions of interest in if you want to be part of that program. So that's just a little bit about our experiences in Canada on PCP, on Compact, and I know we wanted to keep our talks a bit short so there'd be lots of time for questions. So there is lots more I could say about the Compact, but I'm going to leave it at that and welcome your questions.
Well, did you know that Racine also has capacity for 40 million gallons of water per day in case anybody's looking to expand? Okay, you do know. First of all, how about a thanks to Megan and Paul and Fernando for their work. They did a great job. So let's do a quick warm-up question, then we're going to come out to you as an audience. What has been, the three of you, tap your mics to make sure that those are working, okay? Lovely, okay. What has been the most significant challenge that you've faced in moving the entire climate change issues forward? Megan, we'll start on your end.
I think When the PCP first started, a lot of cities were using targets that were kind of consistent with the Kyoto Protocol targets, so like 7% emission reductions. And a lot of cities have achieved those kind of reductions, but scientists are now telling us we need to be aiming in the range of 50% reductions. And I think that ties into what Fernando was saying. We're doing some of the right things, but not in the right dose, right? We really need to up the ante in terms of 7% wasn't nearly enough. We need to be aiming higher. So I think it's kind of changing that mentality that the little pieces aren't going to be enough. We need a more major shift.
Okay, Fernando?
Yeah, I think I'll echo that, actually. Essentially, you hear that?
Just closer, maybe.
Okay. Can you hear me there? Is that better? Okay. So what we're finding, actually, essentially, is that it's not only about initiatives, right? You have to actually get the magnitude right. So if I look at actually, what Toronto's doing, but other sister cities, in the room, actually, I think we pretty much have the initiatives, figured out. And, we have some very well understood, common actions that we can all actually agree on. The one actually that we're struggling with right now in Toronto, and I see it actually with our peer cities, really is what is the proper magnitude in order to actually meet those commitments that were made, which are deep commitments. In the case of Toronto, actually, we have an interim goal that we're working towards for 2020, which is a 30% reduction on a 1990 baseline. So we did really well actually in our 2012 interim target. Primarily, as I described, actually from the coal phase out and conservation and methane capture and all that. We're not so confident actually that we're on track for the 2020, and we definitely know that we're not on track for the 2050. So really, actually, the issue now actually is to get the magnitude right, and the modeling that we're doing actually essentially is really pointing to infrastructure. Seems like infrastructure got us into this problem. Sounds like infrastructure is going to get us out. So not to say actually that, it's not important to actually do, all the engagement, which we do, and it's important actually to look at, social norms and behavior and all that. But it seems to us, based on the modeling actually that we're undergoing right now, that as I described, the issue with emissions from transportation is really, high order, electric transit, and lots of it, not just, one line every 10 years. And similarly, actually, on the building side, same concept. We're not going to get there, actually, or in the case of Toronto, actually, for sure, by looking at building by building. This is an issue where you need to actually build an infrastructure, to actually deal with the issue at scale, and essentially, do that fuel switch. So the fuel switch that we've enjoyed is from coal to renewables and natural gas. Now we're looking to actually go even further and actually fuel switch to renewables, large renewables, so lake, ground source, and other things. So I'll leave it at that.
Paul?
Yeah, I think probably what's most difficult is managing inside of the regulatory framework, the state regulatory framework, because you have the fiduciary responsibilities to manage rates to a certain level, and then you have the responsibilities to manage to federal rules, state rules, and so what you find is in some ways you get projects that are in conflict, right? So you end up with an interest group on one side of an issue or another, and as the investor and utility looking to balance those and discharge your duties, there's always a group that thinks you're kind of on the wrong path. And again, from a customer perspective, in Wisconsin we don't have retail choice, so the electric customers are captive to us. So managing the electric rates through our Public Service Commission in Wisconsin, that becomes a key driver, and it's just one of the kind of facts of life we have to live with.
Okay, we're coming out to you as the audience, and then I'll just ask which one of the folks up here want to answer it if they get a chance. Please let us know who you are and who you're representing, and then ask your question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Jim Tovey. I'm a City of Mississauga councillor and a Region Appeal councillor. Just wanted to thank you all for the presentation. It was absolutely fantastic. The gentleman from Toronto, though, when you put your slide up about your trending line and then you had the actual line above that, you'll notice that in 2005 there was a huge drop down in that. And I know because that was something that I advocated for. I started working on that in 1989, which was to close down the Lakeview coal generating station. In 1996, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Sheila Brasseur, at the time, did a study, and it was determined that 50% of the sulfur dioxide emissions that were landing in Toronto were coming from the Lakeview site, which is 2,250 megawatts, and at the time, only operating at 15%. So
question?
The question, so I'd like a comment from everyone, given that the U.S. has 309,512 megawatts. How important do you think it is to get off coal?
Sorry.
All of you.
Okay. Well, so the answer for me is easy, actually, because we've done it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Paul.
so I think I mentioned in the presentation, the ratio for CO2 coal to gas is roughly 2,000 pounds per megawatt hour versus 700. So I think as we look forward and we look forward to what carbon regulation is going to look like, I think the switching between gas and coal is going to be the cornerstone of that plan.
Yeah, I think a lot of cities, when they first started accounting for emissions, they had sort of like 1990, 1993 baseline years, and that was the height of nuclear. So their emissions coefficients were very low, and they had their emissions looked very low. And then, nuclear was phasing out. The emissions coefficient was sort of getting dirtier, and therefore their emissions were going higher without any direct relation to the activities of the municipality. And I think what it really shone a light on was that municipalities aren't fully in control here. The provinces have a major role to play around energy sources and the energy mix of the province, and it's a big aspect.
There's another final piece, which is if you eliminate the coal trains, you open it up to more freight and passenger rail opportunities as well. In the back, Randy?
I compliment the group on their presentation. One thing that's always bothered me, and especially to Wisconsin, I'm saying, good job. I mean, I'm producing 881 megawatts of wind power today in my community, generating enough electricity for 334,000 homes in Ontario. I'm the largest wind producer in the province of Ontario. But I wanted to say, I listened to the arguments when we talk about climate change. One of the big cities, because I get fearful when state and provincial governments implement laws, because it's usually us little guys that pay the price, when it's the carbon emissions that are coming not necessarily from the cars themselves. It's coming from the car traffic congestions that are creating the extra carbon emissions that is going in the air, because the auto industry is doing a good job. From your perspective, I mean, I understand, we got to change the building code. Well, guess what? You're going to affect me when you do provincial laws. When are the cities, the large cities, who have the most concentrated populations, who create the most traffic jams, going to start being accountable for climate change? Because I looked at your grid system in Toronto. You have all kinds of capacity to put buildings on solar, but yet they're not doing it. There's more work that you have, because in my region, there is no more capacity to put on the grid. I cannot put a solar project on a roof. But you have, in the GTA and the larger areas, the ability to put in the grid. But my question is, when are we going to deal with the mass transit systems, getting people to utilize it? And I always tell people, having a license in a car is a privilege, not a right. And when are you going to take accountability for the congestions that are through traffic jams that are creating the largest portion of our climate issue? Because we have no more coal burning in the province of Ontario. So it puzzles me when everybody, and I support climate change, but I don't support, with our provincial government's recent announcement on climate change, I do not support a lot of the actions that the government is taking, because it's small town Ontario that pays the price for big town ideas.
Okay, tell them who you are, Mayor.
Oh, I'm Randy Hope. I'm the mayor of Chatham-Kent.
There you go. All right, who wants that one?
Well, I can get us started. I'll tell you that it's a really good comment. We don't wait in Toronto. Actually, we don't wait for the Ontario Building Code actually to change fast enough. So we've got actually our own Toronto Green Standard, and we require, as a matter of fact, actually any new development to be 15% more efficient than the code. And we also have actually a tier 2, which is optional, and it has actually rebates on development charges, and that's been very successful. On the traffic issue, all I can say actually is, I'm an engineer, I'm not a planner, but I hang out with planners a lot through my work, community planning. So what I find actually, them telling me actually is that as I'm a resident, I'm experiencing all this growth. They tell me that the growth actually is not by accident. That in fact, actually, this is a deliberate policy from the provincial government, right? To do quote unquote smart growth, right? We put actually the green belt, around the city, the GTA, which is great. And, we're going vertical actually, and it's not an accident. Now, when I read the plan, what I see actually is we were supposed to actually get, transit, and we're supposed to actually get, a bunch of things actually that are coming a little bit hopelessly delayed. So it turns out actually that even as Toronto plans for a broader transit network, it primarily will need to actually be funded by senior levels of government. So again, I'm reminded of the quote, the feds have all the cash, the province has the power actually, and the municipalities have all the problems. So hopefully we'll start getting some alignment on that.
I'd love to see a study done of the City of London, England, because they have some pretty progressive transit and transportation rules now. And I think, like, you're, according to your license plate, you can come into the downtown core every other day. They have some pretty innovative rules there. And I think, the politicians that put that in place are no longer there. They did that in their last term because they knew it was their last term. And I'd love to see a study that really shows, the impact on quality of life for the citizens there and the business opportunities that were hindered or created because of it. Because I think of a lot of our hesitation around that stuff is fear, and I don't know that it's necessarily justified. If we have this great case study, we should study it better and understand the implications.
Paul, do you want to throw anything in on that? Okay. The average American pays about $780 and change in congestion each year. Just for congestion, that's what they're paying. Anybody else? We've got a whole bunch of people out here. This is a good group. Otherwise, I keep talking, and that's bad. Nobody else in climate change, all right? Everybody's good? All right, how about a big round of applause for our speakers today?